So we had a flush to end last week in the S&P 500. You could see here on Thursday, as well as somewhat Friday after this large gap down, the S&P 500 broke a lot of supports and continued to the downside. One of the main supports was actually on SPX. That was 4,400. Once that cracked, it was a 50-point flush all the way down until we bounced around here, which is about 4,340 on SPX. After that, seems as of now there is some support for the market. We were able to close the gap from the previous day, and it's been in a mini upward trend ever since, but something to watch for, especially tomorrow right out of the gates, right at the open. You want to look at this very basic chart pattern, just a channel. Price is ascending within this channel as of Friday's price action. So this is just a 5-minute chart, but this will decide where price goes, specifically into Jackson Hole, which is the end of this week. One of the biggest events of the year. Last year, it was a major drawdown that occurred afterwards. I expect it's going to be more well hedged this year, so that likely won't happen right after the event, but still a big event to look for nevertheless. So continue to watch this key channel over here, just based on the price action that we saw from Friday and how strong it was out of the gates, especially with the rest of the indexes. For example, IWM also bounced quite a bit. I expect this should be that minor low that I've been looking for. Personally, I was looking all the way back here. If you saw the last video as well as that previous Sunday one, I was looking for a minor low around this range up here, roughly the 4,420 to 4,430 range. I was looking for a short-term pop / bounce off this range for some form of minor low, but it continued to the downside afterwards, and it broke through that key support, which is my stop, 4,400. And I'll just show you that really quickly here. Remember, we had the channel before this blue trend line, as well as this blue trend line. We traded within the channel in a downward price action all the way throughout. It was unable to hold the channel, which was key, this 4,420 to 4,430 range that I just mentioned. This is the range that I was looking for a minor bottom to form before a pop higher. It was unable to hold this range, had a rejection below, and then broke below this 4,400 level. And that was the key thing, because then the flush ensued afterwards. This was later in the session on Thursday, with continuation with that gap down on Friday. At the moment, just because of how overextended the downside it is, and also because I am looking for a minor bottom into the end of the month, I would expect that this would act as that minor bottom just based on Friday's price action. Of course, the lows cannot be taken out at any point this week or next week, or else this would be invalidated. But at the moment, because of how strong it was at the start of the day, then we likely can see some more upside before, remember, the downtrend should continue throughout September. This is just a short break basically for the market to let all this compression, which has just been enhanced based on the flush from last week, let all this compression alleviate, basically some upside, a pop, let a lot of short squeeze out, and then it continues afterwards. That's my expectation into September. So watch for that pop potentially this week and next week here. I was wrong about my original thesis from back up here, but that's why I provided that 4,400 level over here to minimize as much risk of potential loss as well. Nevertheless, still watching this SPY chart over here. Again, super basic pattern that I'm watching for Monday, but still important regardless. So I will be watching this as well as key level, which is a key dark pool level that we had from Friday, 4 billion worth of premium at the 436.36 level. Anything over 4 billion, definitely something you want to mark on your chart. Mentioned that before, rare to see 4 billion plus prints. So we're going to mark that right now, 436.36. Go back over to this chart. I want to see price stay above it. That would be a bare minimum, especially on the hourly chart. So if price is able to stay roughly above 436.36 here, then that would be bullish for further upside. But of course, if it breaks back below, especially on the hourly, and it breaks back below this channel that we have here on the 5-minute, but also on the hourly, we had hourly confirmation under both, and we can see some more downside afterwards. So especially if this is going to be a minor bottom, like I'd like to see into the end of the month at the very least, then we're going to want to stay above this 436.36 level, as well as get above this channel as well. So maybe watching for that this week, especially early this week, on Monday and Tuesday possibly. So at least there's a cushion going into Jackson Hole later in the week if we do see some more upside early on. So just something I wanted to note. Also something I want to bring up, this VIX chart over here. Volatility had a large spike Thursday and Friday because of that flush that we saw there, but you can see here, we did have a hard rejection on Friday, and the weekly was unable to close above both my 1760 pivot as well as my key yellow trend line over here. So this is the second key rejection off of this level, which means we likely will see some more downside in terms of volatility heading in here, which would be good for that minor bottom thesis here on the S&P 500. But going back to the VIX, we've yet to have weekly confirmation above this level, so volatility at the moment can remain stagnant until we see that confirmation. My bias is still towards that confirmation happening at some point mid to late September, because once that happens, then we should see an explosion up into the low 20s, which is my base case for September, and that has been for a bit now for some more downside in the S&P 500. But at the moment, it should be time for some form of a pullback in the VIX, especially after having such a hard rejection from my key pivots up here. So this is something that I'm watching as well, and would like to see a trend down in volatility, which would help at least for that minor bottom thesis, like I just said, in the S&P 500. But another thing I do want to mention, some individual tickers for this week. Microsoft interests me a lot. The reason is, as you can see over here, look at these candle wicks, even just on the 50-minute chart. We had a very strong bounce off this trend line. I've had this trend line for a long time. This is the key retest, one of the first of the major, at least big caps, to retest a previous channel. Apple still has a ways to go before it does retest its own key trend line, but Microsoft was one of the first to do so. As you can see here, this was the previous channel that it had been trading within since all the way back almost a year ago, back in October of 2022. And you can see that it traded for a long time until it did have this major gap up over here after earnings, and then continued to the upside because it was able to break out decisively of this channel. And this is the first time we've retested it afterwards. So I expect at the very least there to be short-term pop up here back to the mid 320s. So what does that mean for this week? Would like to see potential entry. So looking at the 50-minute over here, I would like to see an entry if price action will permit it, just based on the trend that it's in right now, at least this downward trend. A base level entry could be something like a breakout of this downward trend line. I would look for some type of mid 320 calls on this, at least for the strike. If it was able to break above, 50-minute confirmation is good. Hourly is even better. Hourly makes sure that there's strength to the upside. It gives you a little bit more time. So if there was an hourly close above this trend line, I take those mid 320 contracts and hold that. It doesn't have to be too long. Hold like 3 to 5 day max on this position if he was able to break above, just because we know we have this support down here just based on technicals alone. Also would help, like I said earlier, if we did have a minor bottom form in the S&P 500, expect Microsoft to be one of the stronger of tech, at least for this upside if we did have a minor bottom form in the market. So we have support down here, very strong support just based on technicals. If it breaks out above here, I would be interested in adding some type of a long position for a short amount of time, of course, just be a tactical long position, but long position nevertheless, and would be looking to add something like that. So I draw a simple trend line right here, all the way back from July 26th. It's been in a downtrend, so breaking above that would warrant some more upside. We could definitely see even 330 potentially on a break here. So this is certainly a valid setup for this week. And I haven't even checked the flow just based on this. It could be a good confluence as well. We'll see what happened. Oh, even better here. I remember actually seeing these on Friday, 445 strikes. These are major leaps, so very, very far out in terms of expiration, but somebody's interested, at least from the macro, probably noticed just based on technicals that we did retest this key trend line over here, or they just saw a variety of other variables. It doesn't have to just be this trend line here, but this is a major macro retest, and they did add a lot of leaps, a ton of premium behind them, 2.5 million, 1.2 million, 1.2 million. All these were opening orders, very far out the money as well. 445 strike is aggressive, but there is a lot of time behind them. So somebody at least was interested just around that level, because they did buy that about an hour and a half after the market opened, which was just about the time that we just started to bounce from over here, just around where we had bottomed. And there was a large uptick afterwards. So somebody else is interested. Yes, they have a much longer time horizon than what personally I'd be trading for, but still interesting to see that there is a lot of premium. These are rare orders, even though they may be leaps, at least for calls. So it's good to see that. And also, I'd like to give an update on Apple. I just looked at this on Friday, and it did interest me just because of how beaten down it is. I did mention when I was looking over Microsoft that it still has more downside to go, at least to retest a key trend line. That key trend line that I'm looking at least would be all the way down here. Yes, I know that is a long ways to go. It's actually not my target. This would be the ideal add in terms of just a pullback to a key trend line to mimic basically what Microsoft had. I don't actually know if we will go all the way down here because it is beaten down by quite a bit right now. But at least for the short term, I thought I'd give an update just based on technicals for you guys. If you look at the 15-minute chart over here, it's interesting based on the bounce that we saw from Friday. There's a potential for a downtrend break this week. We'll We'll have to see if price action will permit it. But basically, this is a simple downtrend line. As you can see over here, we've had an attempt to get above. The reason I chose this pivot is the first hard rejection spot that fits this downward trend. Yes, we had to get above over here, but it was unable to. So all this did act as a rejection spot off the same trend line. And then we also rejected end of day from Friday. So actually wouldn't be surprised if the market, at least for futures tonight, has a good night. I wouldn't be surprised to see a gap and go scenario here, because if it does gap up above this trend line, there's going to be some excess strength because this is beaten down by a lot. So we'll see that compression to the upside if it is ready to go, of course. But same exact thing with what I showed you on Microsoft for a break above this downward trend line. It would be the same thing here. If we had a break above the downward trend line on Apple, there's a potential for a long position here, with your risk being an hourly close under the trend line, which would be very similar for Microsoft. I don't think I mentioned the risk on that one. Hourly close back under would be the risk. You could, of course, enhance that to 2 hours, 4 hours, or even a daily candle if you want to. This is just a basic premise for what I would do, and I, of course, can enter back into that position if we had another hourly close afterwards. I do 2 attempts, for example, on this, just because it's a shorter time duration of a candle. I'm not trading daily candles or weekly candles, but that's basic entry and exit criteria here for Apple for potential upside to 180 again after breaking the downward trend. So, of course, if the market is able to have a minor bottom, we'll just wait, see if we have confirmation above, and then act accordingly on that. So other than that, though, appreciate you guys watching this video. As always, hopefully these trade setups will be beneficial for this week. As always, make sure you are patient and let the trade come to you. Adhere to the criteria, and I'll see you guys next time on Wednesday.